Imagine waking up to a world where the truth you thought you knew is just a story you can rewrite, and that story can work in your favor. In the opening montage, you'll see a politician twisting a speech, a viral advertisement flipping a product's image, and a courtroom where a single line changes the verdict. Those flashes aren't random. They're proof that reality can be reshaped with the right tools. What if I told you that the truth you trust is really a narrative handed to you, and that you have the power to edit that narrative for your own advantage? Last year, a tiny startup took a mediocre gadget and turned it into a market leader simply by changing the story around it. No new technology, no miracle, just a different truth. Do you want to know the exact mental tools they used? Stay with me, and I'll reveal the playbook that lets you steer perception ethically, strategically, and effectively. Welcome back to the channel, the place where we decode the hidden mechanics behind success. Today we dive into a controversial but essential skill, manipulating the truth. Not to deceive, but to frame reality in a way that serves your goals. When we talk about manipulating the truth, we're not talking about outright lies. It's about selective emphasis, framing, and context techniques that marketers, leaders, and negotiators use every day. In business, a compelling narrative can attract investors. In personal life, framing your story can boost confidence and influence relationships. And in the digital age, controlling perception is a survival skill. By the end of this video, you'll walk away with 4 concrete techniques you can start applying today, plus a clear ethical checklist to keep you on the right side of the line. Let's break down how the mind processes truth, and then I'll hand you the toolbox. First, let's explore how our brains build reality. The brain doesn't record a perfect video of the world. It fills gaps with schemas and mental shortcuts called heuristics. That's why 2 people can watch the same event and walk away with different versions of what happened. Confirmation bias means we eagerly accept information that fits what we already believe, and we can prime those beliefs before we even speak. Humans are story-driven. A coherent narrative feels true, even if some details are missing. And memory isn't a static file, it's reconstructed each time we recall it, reshaping the past to fit the present. Picture a courtroom where the same piece of evidence is presented twice. In the first version, the lawyer frames it as a sign of intent, and the jury leans toward guilt. In the second version, the same evidence is described as an unfortunate accident, and the verdict flips. That illustrates how perception, not just fact, drives decision. Understanding these mental levers is the foundation for any truth-shaping strategy. Now let's talk about framing and anchoring, the twin engines that set the reference point for any discussion. The framing effect shows that presenting the same fact as a gain versus a loss changes the decision dramatically. Think of a price tag that reads, now $150, a $50 discount, versus $199, now reduced. The first version feels like a win. The second feels like a loss, even though the final price is identical. Anchoring works the same way. The first piece of information becomes a mental benchmark, and everything that follows is judged relative to it. In conversation, starting with a bold statement creates an anchor, and you can then adjust with qualifiers while still keeping control of the dialogue. Try a quick exercise. Pause the video and rewrite a personal email you've been drafting. Instead of opening with the problem, open with the benefit you'll bring.
Notice how the tone shifts instantly.
The next tool is selective omission and emphasis. What you choose not to say can be as powerful as what you do say. By downplaying certain details and highlighting others, you guide attention exactly where you want it. A classic example is a political speech that repeats the word jobs dozens of times while never mentioning taxes. The audience walks away feeling hopeful about employment, even if the fiscal policy remains unchanged. The ethical guardrails here are simple. Never cross the line into outright deception, and keep the core truth intact. We've covered how perception is built, how frames set the stage, and how omission directs focus. What do you think about using these techniques in your own life? Let me know in the comments. I'm curious to hear your perspective. And that brings us to the final lever in the truth-shaping toolbox. The art of reframing outcomes after the fact, often called retroactive framing. This technique is about taking an event that has already occurred and presenting it in a light that aligns with the narrative you want to sustain. Imagine you missed a deadline, but you choose to highlight the extra research you conducted, the stakeholder feedback you gathered, and the risk mitigation you performed. By emphasizing the value-added steps, the audience perceives the delay as a strategic pause rather than a failure. The key is to anchor the story on the positive actions taken, not on the missed target. In practice, you can do this by crafting a brief post-mortem that starts with the achievement, then subtly weaves in the obstacle as a stepping stone. This not only preserves credibility, but also reinforces the perception that you are always moving forward, even when setbacks arise. Now, let's pause for a moment and reflect on the ethical dimension of all these techniques. The line between persuasive framing and manipulation can be thin, and it's essential to keep a clear set of guardrails. First, ask yourself whether the core facts remain intact. If you are omitting a detail, does that omission change the fundamental truth of the situation? Second, consider the impact on the other party. Are you steering perception in a way that benefits both sides, or are you creating an advantage at the expense of fairness? Third, think about long-term reputation. Short-term gains achieved through deceptive spins can erode trust, making future negotiations harder. Finally, be transparent about your intentions when possible. If you're presenting a product, a brief disclaimer about the scope of the claim can go a long way toward maintaining integrity while still using persuasive language. To help you internalize these principles, I've distilled them into a simple ethical checklist you can keep on your desk or phone. The first item asks you to verify that no factual distortion has occurred. The second prompts you to evaluate whether the framing serves a constructive purpose. The third reminds you to weigh the potential harm against the benefit. And the fourth encourages you to document the decision-making process so you can revisit it later and ensure you stayed within your own moral boundaries. By running each new communication through this mental filter, you'll develop a habit of ethical persuasion that feels natural rather than forced. Let's put everything together with a quick, real-world scenario. Suppose you're pitching a new service to a potential client. You start by anchoring the conversation with a bold statement about the market opportunity, framing it as a chance to capture untapped demand. You then selectively highlight case studies that mirror the client's industry, while briefly mentioning less relevant examples without dwelling on them. As you discuss pricing, you use a gain frame, presenting the discount as a limited-time advantage rather than a reduction from a higher price. After the meeting, you send a follow-up email that retroactively frames the discussion as a collaborative discovery session, emphasizing the insights you co-created. Throughout the process, you run each step through the ethical checklist, ensuring that the core data about ROI, timelines, and deliverables remain accurate, and that the client feels empowered rather than manipulated. The result is a compelling narrative that aligns perception with reality, builds trust, and moves the deal forward. You might be wondering how to practice these skills without feeling like a puppet master. The answer lies in incremental application. Start with low-stakes situations, such as rewriting a social media post or adjusting the way you describe a weekend plan to friends. Notice how a subtle shift from "I'm stuck with a boring schedule" to "I have a focused agenda that lets me accomplish key tasks" changes the reaction you receive. As you become comfortable, you can layer additional techniques anchoring, selective emphasis, retroactive framing into more complex interactions like performance reviews or strategic presentations. The more you experiment, the more intuitive the process becomes, and the less it feels like a calculated trick. Before we wrap up, I want to hear from you. Have you ever used any of these framing tricks without realizing it? Did a particular story you heard change the way you view a product or a person? Share your experiences in the comments below. I'm genuinely curious about the ways you've seen truth reshaped in everyday life. Your stories not only enrich the conversation but also help others see the practical side of these concepts.
If you found this deep dive useful, consider giving the video a thumbs up.
It signals to the platform that this kind of content resonates with you, and it helps more people discover these strategies.
And if you're new here, feel free to subscribe for more explorations into the hidden mechanics behind success, influence, and human behavior.
I'm always adding fresh insights that you can apply right away, so staying tuned will keep you ahead of the curve. To close, Remember that the power to shape perception is a responsibility as much as it is a skill. When used with integrity, it can amplify your message, align teams, and open doors that would otherwise stay closed. When misused, it erodes trust and creates a fragile foundation that can crumble under scrutiny. By mastering the psychological levers of perception, framing, omission, and retroactive storytelling while anchoring each move to a solid ethical framework, you equip yourself with a versatile toolkit for personal and professional growth. Keep practicing, stay honest to the core truth, and watch how the world begins to respond to the narrative you craft. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.